Good afternoon. Thank you for your attendance, and I will be giving the charge for this class of 2014. This speech is dedicated first and foremost in the name of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who by his grace gave me light while I walked in darkness and guided my feet into the blessed way of peace. I dedicate this speech to my parents and to all young Americans of all walks, whether of high or low estate, learned or unlearned, religious or irreligious, whatever their condition may be, who will, in the future, act their part on the stage of life, and I pray to work alongside them in their efforts to leave this world a better place after our having lived in it. When I say, out with the old and in with the new, each one of us has different thoughts and feelings towards that old saying. Some of you may instantly think of the most recent technological advances we've made and the conveniences they bring to our lives. For example, we've gone from record players to iTunes. We've gone from VHS tapes to Netflix. We've gone from writing letters to our friends and loved ones to sending abbreviated text messages via cell phone. Instead of sitting down together to browse through family albums, we can Snapchat each other. Instead of marking our calendars with important dates, we rely on our Facebook news feed to remind us of whose birthday it is and what they're trending. And if being able to travel comfortably by car wasn't enough, we have DVD players built into the backs of our seats, or a means of plugging the family iPad into a charger to entertain the kids. Out with the old and in with the new. However, many of us may find it difficult to look past the negative or stop dwelling on the newest evils whenever it is said, out with the old and in with the new. Some reasons we may find that saying to be gloomy instead of hopeful include, but are not limited to, the following facts. We live in the country that has one of the highest chances a child will die before age 5. We have the highest teen pregnancy rate. Our kids can curse and swear like sailors in schools, but they're told they cannot pray aloud. Compared to 16 other developed countries, we are the unhealthiest and sedentary. We send our troops abroad every day, yet we cannot secure our own borders. We used to consider the love of money as the root of all evil, but now we act as though not having enough money is the root of all evil. What we used to consider abominable acts, unsuitable for the public eye, we now accept as normal in our movie theaters. We've gone from being well known as the most Christian nation in the world to being called a, quote, godless sewer, end quote, by the president of Russia. And may God forgive us, we've banned teaching the Bible in our public schools. Out with the old and in with the new. Whether you are an American by birth or choice, it should not be difficult to see that we as a nation are but a disfigured, tumultuous debacle of our former glory, and that's describing it lightly. Whether you are in favor of our current culture and government or not, history and reality will force you to admit that this nation is, quite simply, circling the drain. All one needs to do is read the Bible, the Declaration of Independence, or the Constitution, and they will be unable to ignore or avert their eyes to the disparity of our nation today, to see the ominous, foreboding, corrupted atmosphere in the halls of Congress, our churches, schools, and the damaged hearts of our people. Dark times have fallen upon our republic. The vast majority of American young adults, and don't start throwing things at me when I say this, the vast majority of American young adults, this nation's future, are no longer concerned about the welfare of their neighbors and community, or the integrity of their government. And as I believe, this disregard for public spirit displays how hopelessly disconnected they are from reality. Instead, they party, take selfies, labor to meet the crooked expectations of a twisted educational system, and then when they do have leisure time, they waste it by discussing, watching, or reading fantasy worlds of movies and novels, gossiping, raving over celebrities, or craving sports. They have no intellectual veracity because they know nothing of pressing importance, or scarcely ever give their own potential to do good a just consideration. Their dreams, goals, aims, purposes, and resolutions are rarely ever elevated to lofty heights. They live on earth for a while, maybe make enough to provide for themselves, maybe start a family, and go through the seasons of a simple, struggling life because they are unable to redeem the time they lost in their youth, which they willfully spent on the vanities and prides of temporary pleasure. What I've just said pricks me in the heart, because they unwarily fight against the happiness of their own souls. And I fear the longer we allow children to pass into adulthood without even a trace of that indispensable support known as the Bible, the more wrath we bring down upon everyone in this nation. Our forefathers will have labored in vain. What frightens me the most about America's so-called future leaders is their dearth of individuality, unique thought, uncompromising moral rectitude, and faith in God. But I'll come back to that in a moment. I'm speaking with very broad terms here, so I'm betting I've lost a few of you, if not angered all of you. So to jump to the point, here is where I want you to perk up your ears. Simply put, our country, both its people and its government, need another great awakening. And to put the solution in very simple terms, I'll quote a movie that I assume most all young people here have seen, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. In that movie, Cap's old friend Peggy said something astoundingly direct about how to fix our country. She said, quote, "Sometimes the best that we can do is to start over," end quote. But are we at that point yet? Is there anything worth salvaging? Should we revert back to what built this country and guided the lives of our founding fathers? I believe so. And it's up to each of us individually, graduates, teachers, parents, and the like, to decide, based on what made this country great in the past, if starting over is what we need. While this is a special day for me, I am not so bold as to think that I yet could say or add anything new about how to preserve America's liberty, because many, many other more qualified patriots throughout our history have already spoken and shared their advice and knowledge on how to curb government corruption and restore virtuous civil piety, and thus the happiness of our nation. I will quote two sources, one from a speech given by a U.S. president, and the other a couple verses out of the Old Testament King James Bible. The first speech I would like to cite is from President Ronald Reagan's farewell speech. He is quoted as saying, quote, "We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise. And freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs protection. So, we've got to teach history based not on what's in fashion, but what's important. Why the Pilgrims came here, who Jimmy Doolittle was, and what those 30 seconds over Tokyo meant." You know, 4 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, I read a letter from a young woman writing to her late father, who'd fought on Omaha Beach. Her name was Lisa Zanata Hen, and she said, "We will always remember. We will never forget what the boys of Normandy did." Well, let's help her keep her word. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning of an eradication of the American memory that could result ultimately in an erosion of the American spirit. Let's start with some basics. More attention to American history and a greater emphasis on civic ritual. And let me offer lesson number 1 about America. All great change begins at the dinner table. So, tomorrow night in the kitchen, I hope the talking begins. And children, if your parents haven't been teaching you what it means to be an American, let them know and nail them on it. That would be a very American thing to do. End quote. The second source I would like to cite is from the Bible, Hosea chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. God speaking through Hosea, read, quote, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. As they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore will I change their glory into shame." End quote. I agree with both President Reagan and the prophet Hosea. There's a saying that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The same principle applies to entire nations. If the average American household, which is the foundation of communities, is broken or resembles The Simpsons, there is scarcely any hope for the government because, according to the Americans' creed, we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If the people are disbanded and set at odds in their own families, how can we expect them to rise to a seat in our government? Truly, if you want to work to repair this country, start by helping families and sharing the true gospel with them. Do what you can with what you have where you are. The father of our nation, George Washington, was correct when he said that, quote, happiness and moral duty are inseparably connected, end quote. I'll let you take that to heart how you will. As for what the prophet said, knowledge and the lifelong pursuit of it is a seed that must be planted in youth, or else it is likely their flower will never bloom to its fullest capabilities. A child's mind is by nature inquisitive and will soak up every lesson it is presented with, especially the unintended ones we unwittingly serve up to them. The fact that we have created entities, Common Core, that cynically crush this natural hunger is proof that there is a profound institutional inertia that infects much of our K-12 education. I agree with the Apostle Paul's instructions on giving attendance to reading as a most enjoyable means of attaining knowledge. But the daunting task for most of us is discerning what must be learned and taught, because we can all agree that time is too precious to pursue everything that catches our attention. God created us as beings capable of reasoning, and at some point in everyone's life or another, young or old, we all stand beside Pontius Pilate and ask the deep and audacious question, what is truth? And from there, seek to understand the why of both men and things. Time is too precious to read every novel, to watch every movie, to watch every show, to play every video game, to like everything on Facebook, to pursue every hobby. That kind of trifling away of time and idleness of mind is part of what ruined Sodom, Gomorrah, and Babylon. My fellow graduates, class of 2014, my advice is that if you should sometimes think that studying is laborious and exhausting, consider this. Labor is the unavoidable fatigue of a necessary journey, and the more hours a day you travel, the sooner you will be at your journey's end. It is with this in mind that I echo the teachings of Victor Hugo and George Washington. Quote, adversity makes men, prosperity makes monsters. Let your recreational activities be manly, not sinful, end quote. It is my solemn suggestion that I urge upon you, my fellow graduates, and everyone in the audience, read the New Testament, our Declaration of Independence, and our Constitution to spark or reignite your senses to a principled observation and discharge of your public and moral duties. With that being said, class of 2014, graduates, we have our work cut out for us. In closing, in my ways of acknowledgement and voicing appreciation, I would first and foremost like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Daniels, or as nearly everyone associated with Victory Performing Arts Academy has come to know them as, Mr. Mel and Miss Pat. Thank you for your continuous and steadfast support throughout the years, not just towards me, but for your many services and efforts to properly educate America's rising generation and to make those means of education possible. To my parents, thank you for keeping me on the right path through love and undying biblical admonishment. To my fellow graduates, though I may only be acquainted with but a few of you, my prayers will be with you all that the Lord will guide and protect you in your endeavors throughout life to prove yourselves useful to God and dignified by men. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for your attendance and encouragement. I would ask that you all keep in your private prayers these young people as they grapple with new responsibilities in life, that you pray for this nation and its leaders, and that you remember, only those persons who are willing to recast whole systems in the interest of truth are big enough to lead the world. Thank you. welcome to the stand Mr. William Bledsoe.
I just asked Michael, how am I going to follow that? That was super. I remember when Michael came to our Young Marine unit in Crestview, he has certainly come a long way.